Carly Suspension, this is Tyler.
Hi, Tyler. This is Mike Swear. I bought some front end parts from you all about 6-7 years ago. The tie rod, the ball joints, sway bar arm, gas shock.
Okay.
And what's happening is the steering is wandering from left to right. That's what it was doing before I put all this stuff on. It seemed to never really go away. So, any suggestions on what might be going on here?
You may want to check for play in any one of your front end components on the truck.
They all seem tight.
Okay. Well, I mean, the only real way to check and make sure that all these parts are still functioning properly is to check for play. If you've already checked like your steering linkages, you've already checked your track bar, you've already checked the ball joints, you may want to consider checking the steering box itself to see if you're getting any slack in those or down in that steering box itself.
That's what it seems like. It seems like the steering box might be loose and it's like going back and forth and you're oversteering.
So we've got a really great write-up on our website. It's an article that's in the media section of carlysuspension.com, and that article is called The Death of Death Wobble. It is specifically geared around the third-gen Ram, so the 03 to 09 Ram platform, and it tells you exactly how to diagnose any sort of wobbles in the steering system. It starts mentioning that tires can be the sole culprit in some situations if they're significantly out of balance. That it also goes into the steering components, so your linkages, your steering gearbox. It also goes through the track bar, the ball joints, and even the control arms as far as all those joints, ensuring that they're nice and tight. So if I was you, that would be the first place that I would go, is to our website and to look at that Death of Death Wobble article. It should give you a pretty good idea of how to diagnose where your issue is stemming from and how to fix it. I mean, that would be the first place to steer you towards. If you just go on Google and you search Carly Suspension, The Death of Death Wobble, you'll get that article come right up.
Okay. Now, I have two questions.
Okay.
One, there's a gas shock that you sold me. I think it was nitrogen.
Yeah, probably the steering stabilizer shock.
Do I ever have to refill that thing, or?
You may want to double check that it's still full. You may want to, tighten that valve stem core that's at the top of the shock body, right where you're going to attach and fill the nitrogen.
Okay.
You may want to double check that valve stem core is nice and tight, so tighten that thing up. And then, you want that thing between about 50 psi and 200 psi. That is going to range depending on if you have a tire pull or not, like a radial pull.
Okay.
We send them with 200 psi, and that's to correct for a right-hand pull. If the vehicle starts tracking to the left, then you just have to release some pressure. 50 psi is going to be the minimum pressure that you can run in that thing and it function properly.
Okay.
Yep.
And when you put your ball joints in, without the steering arm attached, I have resistance moving that wheel back and forth.
Very slight. It shouldn't bind up to where you have to put all your might and even like a long pry bar into it to get it to go lock to lock. It should be relatively smooth going from lock to lock without significantly binding up. There can be some kind of, tightness in it, which the steering box itself would take care of in order to overpower any sort of kind of tight feels in those joints.
Okay.
But it shouldn't, like I said, it shouldn't take all your might to get it to go lock to lock. It should just, have a little bit of resistance as it goes.
Well, I tell you, I take me both hands and probably a good 30 pounds of pulling force to move them, both sides.
Okay. Do you happen to, any chance you could kind of mimic that in a video and send that over to us and kind of show us exactly what you're referring to?
Well, what I'm saying is, if you disconnect your steering wheel, so now all you have left is the ball joints, the spindle,
Mm-hmm.
and the rotor. If I grab that thing and turn it all the way to the front and then all the way to the back.
So you can grab it without the tire on and without having that extra leverage to get it to crank. You can grab the actual knuckle and you can crank it from lock to lock.
Yeah, but it takes some force to do it.
Gotcha. Typically, that's not going to be enough for the steering box to not overcome. It's going to be something to where, like, let's say you disconnect the tie rod, but you still have this actual tire on the vehicle. Okay. That's when, if you can't get it to go, when you have that extra leverage of the tire being mounted to the hub, that's when your steering system would also have a hard time kind of overpowering that.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you put too much grease in these ball joints, would that affect it terribly, or?
No. The thing is, there's some rubber seals inside of those ball joints, like little O-rings in there. If you over-grease them, the grease is either going to pass by those O-rings and kind of slip out the opposite end of the joint, or it can potentially unseat those O-rings and pop them out of the ball joint itself, which is why you never want to use like a pneumatic grease gun that's just going to pump a lot of pressure into them and potentially unseat that O-ring. But as far as putting too much in there, when you're greasing them up with a hand grease gun, once that thing goes nice and firm and it's not allowing you to easily press grease in anymore, that means the cavity is full. So nothing to worry about there. You just don't want to let them go dry is the key.
Right. I used a cordless grease gun, so the bottoms, I actually heard it pop. So I probably blew the grease seals or the O-rings out on the bottoms. It
could have possibly taken out that O-ring. But you would typically see that start to kind of come out of the end of the ball joint if it was unseated.
Okay, this came
so
out.
It could have just got a lot of pressure, and then the pressure seeped past the seal, which created kind of a loud noise. So it doesn't necessarily mean the seal unseated, but yeah, like I said, you would start to see that come out of the end of the body.
Okay, then now the top, it just went and it wouldn't go no more, and that's when I stopped. So
perfect. That's exactly what you got to do.
Okay, all right. I was just curious whether the ball joints were binding that from turning left to right and causing me an issue. That's all.
Gotcha. Yeah, and if, like I said, if you can kind of crank it lock to lock with your hand just by grabbing the actual hub itself, I don't see any reason why that shouldn't be overpowered by the steering system. It normally is very, very apparent when that thing is too tight. Like, you just can't physically grab and turn it.
Yeah, I mean, I can grab it and I can turn it, but there's a good amount of resistance to do that. But like I said, the tire wasn't on there, so.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, you had the minimum amount of leverage possible in order to do that. So, yeah, I'd say that it's not too tight. Doesn't sound like it to me.
Right, because like on race cars, you go the opposite way. You want them things as free as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what made me wonder about that.
Gotcha. Understood.
All right. I will go to that website there and check that out.
Perfect. Sounds good. And once again, it's called The Death of Death Wobble.
Okay. All right, buddy.
Cool. Right on, Mike. Well, if anything else comes up, sir, feel free to reach back out anytime down here.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Right on. Take it easy.